I respectfully acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the world's oldest educators and the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was recorded, Darkin Jung Country, surrounded by the beautiful Booty National Park, Brisbane Water and Putty Beach. The land we learn, teach, play and walk upon always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Teaching is one of the most rewarding vocations, yet great teachers are burning out and leaving the classroom in record numbers. Welcome to the PDHPE and CAFS podcast with your host, Kel Bell. This podcast empowers busy New South Wales teachers of PDHPE, CAFS and HMS to teach with confidence, clarity and ease. I understand the challenges of teaching because I've lived them. With more than 2 decades in education, I've journeyed from classroom teacher to becoming New South Wales' trusted voice in PDHPE, community and family studies and health and movement science. Together with leading experts and teachers just like you, we're here to help you reclaim your afternoons, weekends and holidays through practical resources, supportive memberships and powerful professional learning. Ready to reclaim your time? Access your classroom-ready PDHPE, CAFS and HMS tools at thelearnnet.com/tools. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and let's chat about creating impact in your classroom without burning out in the process. Hello, everyone, and a huge welcome back to the PDHP and CAFS podcast. Today, if you are like a primary teacher or high school teacher and you're trying to navigate how you teach and empower your students around vaping, drugs, alcohol, all those sorts of things, we are joined by a very special guest today. Associate Professor Emily Stockings joined us at the K-10 PDHP Forum, and we are very lucky to have her on the podcast today. So huge welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much, Kel, for having me along.
Thank you. And can you give our listeners a little bit of background as to what your role is at the University of Sydney and what you guys are doing in your research and in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a full-time nerd, I like to call myself. So I am an Associate Professor at the University of Sydney. I work within a research centre called the Matilda Centre for Research in Mental Health and Substance Use. So we are full of full-time researchers who do everything from design new programs, run clinical trials of new treatments. We work with government, we work with schools. Effectively, what we're trying to do is reduce the burden of mental health disorders and substance use disorders across the lifespan. So that's sort of what the whole Matilda Centre does. My area of expertise and my program is called Smoking, Vaping and Mental Health. So I have a particular interest and did my PhD in nicotine dependence and understanding the factors that make young people vape, and have been designing and testing vaping prevention programs for high schools. And we are now just starting to dabble into primary schools and develop them there as well. So it's a broad area, obviously, going across mental health and substance use. And look, it's so fantastic, so dynamic, but a lot to cover.
And I think it's just such a broad, it's just such a massive issue in our country that, it's like, where do you kind of start? Just a complete minefield. How did you get into this work around substance abuse? I'm very curious.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Dubbo, Central West New South Wales, to pretty average Aussie family, big focus on sport, cricket, rugby, that kind of thing. When I was about 5, we moved to the Central Coast of New South Wales. So I'm a coastie at heart. I lived there until I was about 23 in Lisero, if you know it. Probably don't. And I enjoyed school, like the academic side of school. And when I finished Year 12, I got a scholarship to study at the University of Newcastle. And I remember having a conversation with my English teacher. She was my favourite teacher, Ms. Lynch. And I wanted to do law. I loved public speaking. I said, I want to stand in, be a barrister, effectively. And she goes to me, Emily, you're too nice to be a lawyer. And which I thought that was a nice compliment, stories of the lawyers. And then she said, you know what, you've got a very curious mind, so why don't you broaden your perspective and do something like psychology? And because anything she said was gospel to me, I was like, okay, well, I'll do psychology. So I applied for psychology at Newcastle Uni, and because I was on the coast, we were classified as a rural school, and I got in and studied psychology. And I was fascinated by the human brain, not just the neurodevelopment side of things, but the impact of social environment on our behavior, the way that our peer groups can influence our behavior, and the way that we apply research to understand human behavior. Why do people do the things that they do? And I was really fascinated by that. In my fourth year of psychology, I got offered a scholarship to do a PhD. And at that time, a lot of other people were grappling with, I need to get an internship, I need to get a job. Doing a PhD seemed like a really good way to just avoid all of that and just stay at uni for a little bit longer. So I ended up doing my PhD in the topic of health psychology, so understanding how human behavior impacts health. And this kind of subtopic within that was smoking. So I spent a solid 3 to 4 years working with people in inpatient psychiatric facilities, so very unwell, from ages 16 up to 85, and trying to help people improve their health behavior. So not just focusing on how's your mental health, but how's your physical health as well. And in doing that, I realized that about 90% of the people that I saw were very heavy smokers, and they were using that to cope with stress, to cope with anxiety. They were struggling to quit. They were spending all their money on it. And I thought, so much of this comes back to improving and reducing smoking. So I did my PhD in that topic. I then got a postdoc position at University of New South Wales, where I looked at the causes of mental disorders, what treatments work. And then in 2019, I was commissioned by the federal government, who said to us as a research centre, this is at University of New South Wales, they're like, so we're hearing this sort of, rumblings on the ground around vaping and e-cigarettes. We want you to write a report and to get us to understand what's going on. And at the time, we didn't really know what was going on. The US and the UK vapes were appearing, but it hadn't really happened in Australia. We kind of thought we were, the lucky country, we were safe. And it wasn't until after COVID that suddenly vapes exploded on the scene, and they were appearing in schools, and we'd gone from being the lucky country to having vapes everywhere. So since then, my research has really focused on, what causes young people to choose to vape? How many are vaping? What are the health harms? But importantly, what can teachers do? What can parents do? So applying my knowledge of human health and behaviour to designing programs that can provide all that information without teachers having to develop everything from the ground up. So that's sort of a very long-winded way of saying I'm interested in how we can prevent vaping in young people. Yeah.
So interesting how our life just unfolds and one thing leads to another, or someone so impactful. And I love that you said a teacher had that conversation with you as a young person. I think a lot of teachers really underestimate the impact that they have on, decisions, choices, young people's kind of life. You kind of are in the grind and you're doing the do, but then I think when you kind of step back, you go, wow, we're very lucky to do what we do, and the impact that we make is so profound. And we've been certainly sharing that with our teachers, our primary teachers, our high school teachers, because what we do is so impactful. And I do know Lisarow because we moved from Western Sydney in the Hills District up to Kilcare.
Beautiful.
Nearly 9 years ago. Yeah. So I know where Lisarow is.
Yeah.
The Central Coast is very beautiful and very unique. But you're lucky to do what you do now in your work.
It's amazing.
Coasty that you were.
Exactly. And I go back there a fair bit. My parents are still there in Lisarow. And often I think about Ms. Lynch, my English teacher, and, she would have, we had that conversation, and for her that was a convo, and the next thing she's gone to marking, and then the next day unfolds and she's doing the doing, as you say. And I haven't been in touch with her. She wouldn't know the impact that conversation had. So the other thing is that teachers don't necessarily see it, and that can be really hard as well, but hugely influential. I could be doing a completely different job and I wouldn't be talking to you today.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice. So we don't want to bore teachers with statistics and stuff, but you mentioned that it kind of vaping especially has really risen significantly. Why have you guys seen after COVID? What was the catalyst for that? Was it just coincidental, or How did that kind of unfold?
So we kind of, now we can look back because it's been a few years now, but it
Yeah.
was around 2019 that we first heard rumblings, and the government was worried about vaping because in the US there was what was called the EVALI outbreak, which is e-cigarette or vaping associated lung injury, and a
Oh,
bunch of people actually died in the States
wow.
after vaping e-cigarettes that they were effectively contaminated. They had vitamin E acetate in them, and it caused extreme inflammation of the lungs to the point that people died in hospital. And so the Australian government heard of that, and they were incredibly frightened, as you would be as a
Yeah.
government, and thought we have to do whatever we can to stop this. Then COVID happened, and looking back, I think what happened at that time is that we were obviously distracted for good reason, and a lot of our health resources, border force resources, went towards protecting the border, keeping people safe, allocating health funds to other, to hospitals and to pop-up testing clinics. And we were distracted and sort of blinded by what was happening in China at the time, where there were huge companies that were producing millions of e-cigarettes a day at pretty low cost, and then getting them on boats and then importing them into Australia at a time when we were sort of looking the other way. So what happened was it was a time of weakness across the country. And, Australia's not alone in this, and there's no fault of anyone. It was a
Yeah.
pandemic, right? But that's really when it kicked off. So we had a lot of imports coming in that were not checked at the border. We also at the time had this funny loophole, which has since been closed with the e-cigarette reforms, but it used to be legal to sell vapes so long as they didn't have nicotine in them. And so a lot of the Chinese producers were like, cool, that's wonderful. What we're going to do is just take nicotine off the label and then import them into the Australian market. And it's going to be almost impossible for Border Force. They get a box of them, or millions of boxes a day, open them up, have a look. Does it say nicotine or not? It doesn't say nicotine. Okay, cool, send it on through. The only way that they could have checked this was to take them apart, test them using, chemical testing to determine if nicotine is in there. And there's just no chance that was going to happen. And you couldn't do it for everyone. So we had this loophole as well that sort of let them come in. At the same time, kids are at home, young people are, adults are at home. They're bored. They don't have any outlet. They're looking for something that can sort of give them a hit, give them a bit of boost, because we don't have any of that social interaction. And a significant number of people have said to me, I started vaping during COVID because I was at home on my own all the time and I was bored. And it was easy to get them. It was still, quote unquote, legal to buy the non-nicotine ones, even though they secretly had nicotine in them. And so we were kind of vulnerable. We were letting them come in and everyone was at home. And when you're at home, we also saw at the same time, so it wasn't just vaping, but an increase in alcohol use, an increase in domestic violence. It's the behind closed doors type thing where the behavior goes unchecked and there's no social kind of interaction to go, hey, you've been doing that a lot. Are you okay? And so these behaviors sort of were brewing and bubbling under the surface. And then when we emerged from it, we've gone, oh, crap, there's a lot of vapes everywhere. So I think that's sort of where it all kicked off. It was like the perfect storm, really. And we've been dealing with the consequences ever since.
Yeah, it's like so crazy how one little thing, one thing can have such a ripple effect on the health and well-being of so many people, and so many loopholes that, probably that they're probably still feeling the fallout from that
Exactly.
in the country.
Yeah. And now we're seeing the same thing with illicit tobacco, the cheap cigarettes, which is a whole other conversation, but similar kind of story, right? They're coming in the same shipments. They're being sold in the same convenience stores. And once it's in, it's very hard to go backwards from there, to get them out of the country when that supply chain is well established. Yeah.
And is that what's caused a lot of the reforms and a lot of tobacco companies, shop fronts actually shutting because they've been inspected? And
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of the year, it was 2023, the federal government announced a the vaping reform bill, which was basically to close that loophole. So at that time, and it was effective, I think it was October 24 or 25. At that time, they removed any disposable vape at that point became an illegal product. The only legal vapes were the ones that could be sold through pharmacies for the purpose of people quitting smoking, which is a legitimate way to use them.
Yeah.
And certain labeling requirements and flavor restrictions also came in. So that was the main reform that came in. So from that point onwards, there was no legitimate reason for a 7-Eleven or a supermarket or any other independent convenience store selling these. You actually, it's illegal to do so. The only legal vape is one that is sold through a pharmacy after you have a conversation with a pharmacist, in the same way that you would do if you want a behind-the-counter medicine, like Phenergan or Sudafed, for example.
Yeah.
So we had, it's an absolute minefield. So we had this explosion of, entrepreneurial people who were like, this is this new product, everyone loves it, I'm allowed to sell the nicotine-free ones. So they all popped up. And at one point, there was an estimate, there still is a lot, around 25,000 of these in New South Wales alone, selling vapes and now selling illicit tobacco. And then effectively overnight, that became illegal. So we've got all these shops out there who have, they're effectively criminal organisations that get the shipments from the boats and then use local couriers to distribute them to the shops. That's all still happening. So it's down to enforcement and getting the health authorities involved in shutting them down. And there were some changes in the law, so it's easier to shut them down. You can do an immediate stop work or immediate closure notification for a period of, I think it's 90 days if you've caught selling anything. But then you can come back and keep selling them. And it's really up to, the capacity of the enforcement teams to keep on top of it. And when there's 25,000 and you can quickly close your shop and then get a new lease and then open up down the road, it's very easy to just keep starting afresh. So we now have this really bad enforcement problem. Like there's just so much on the ground, and there are so few enforcement officers that they can't keep up. And so we call this supply reduction issues when it comes to drugs. So there are two main ways that we stop drugs coming into the country or to try to reduce the impact of drug use in Australia. And this includes illegal drugs like cocaine and heroin and MDMA, but also legal drugs like tobacco and alcohol, right? There are quite strict restrictions on supply and on sale. So these are things like you can't advertise tobacco, you can't sell alcohol to anyone under age 18, you have to, there can't be too many alcohol shops altogether. We call that zoning restrictions or density limits. These things all do apply, but the e-cigarettes and illicit tobacco, because it's already illegal, they're kind of running underneath that. Nothing really applies. So all of the supply reduction techniques that we have, we can't use them. They're not working. So we look to the other side, which is demand reduction. What if young people just didn't want to vape? What if they just didn't want to smoke? What if they didn't want to drink alcohol? So the demand reduction programs are things like public health campaigns that tell you that they're bad for you. School-based programs that demonstrate, look, this is a healthier thing to do. You should do this instead. So at the Matilda Centre in my work has been heavily focused on demand reduction because the supply reduction is effectively out of our hands. This is government responses. This is laws and regulations. We need them, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So in a world where vapes are everywhere, what can we do? We can try to encourage and empower young people to choose not to vape, which is the area of research that we're sort of working into. It's worked really well with alcohol. You think alcohol and vapes are very similar in that they are targeted to young people, they are socially acceptable, they have good flavours, they're marketed with, desirable celebrities and pretty pictures on and designs on the bottles. It's all very similar. And we have seen a reduction in alcohol use in young people, which is amazing. Aussies have, we still do, but for a long time it's been a drinking culture. same as the UK. But in recent generations, we're seeing that drop much more so among, Gen Z, Gen Alpha than amongst the boomer generation and millennials. And that's been with the same level of availability of alcohol, pretty much the same price, pretty much the same social acceptability of it. We're thinking, what changed for alcohol and how can we apply that to vaping? And it's because young people have realized that you feel crappy when you're drunk. You get anxiety the next day. You get out of control. They don't want that. So we've got a really empowered generation of young people who know the impact on the brain, and we want to try to utilize that and apply the same thing to vapes.
Wow. It's so interesting how all of that kind of like completely ties into now, like the job of, I'm going to say the job of a teacher, the role of a teacher to educate young people about, the whole scare tactics. I don't know if teachers realize that doesn't work. It's decision making. And I'm sure that's what, is part of your research and your programs, that, young people need to be empowered to make, good choices and how to say no and how to, not give in, but, how to make wise choices for their health.
Exactly. It's so hard, all of that stuff that I've just told you, which is all fascinating and incredible. And, I find it really interesting. That's my full-time job, right? I am a researcher with specialist expertise in nicotine dependence and drug markets, right? You can't expect, and we don't expect, and we don't want teachers to need to know all that. It would be a waste of their time. And then you've also got to do it for bullying and wellness and neurodivergence, and it is impossible.
Yeah.
So what we try to do at the Matilda Centre, and we developed, the director of the Matilda Centre, Marie Thiessen, and my colleague Nicola Newton, who are both professors, developed a not-for-profit organisation called the Our Futures Institute. So what they do, they're kind of like our distributor. We are nerdy researchers. We do all this kind of working out of the markets and trends and statistics and evidence. And once we've developed and tested a program in a clinical trial, same that you would do for a medicine, we then say to the institute, this one's good. We want you to get it out there to schools. Our expertise is not liaising with teachers, understand curriculum, working out lesson plans. It is increasingly, I'm getting more exposure to that world. They're the experts in doing that. So what we try to do is develop a program that's evidence-based, that incorporates all of this knowledge from experts who've been working in this field for a long time, and packaging it up nicely so that teachers can then apply it in class without needing to know all the extra stuff around it. So we did this really effectively for years 7 and 8. We have a secondary school vaping prevention program, which is called Our Futures Vaping Prevention. And what we do to make it engaging, because we know that is obviously an important thing for teachers, to have good, fun, educational content, not boring textbook stuff. No, not to diss textbooks, I've written some. But they come in cartoons. So the 7 and 8 program is an online cartoon, and the teachers get given a dashboard. And the idea is that it's 4 lessons, each are about 40 minutes long, delivered once a week, or you could do, an intensive where they're all done together. And they follow the lives of young people. So we have 4 characters who are all in year 7 and 8. And they're doing the stuff that kids normally do. They've got crushes, they're going to parties, they're being pressured into things they might not want to do. And we get the characters modelling the behaviours we want the students to learn. So things like critical inquiry. Someone says, oh, why would you just puff on that? It's just water vapor. And then someone going, is it actually water vapor though? Like, why don't we actually look into that? Let's do some research. So getting them to question normative perceptions, or then getting them to go, it seems like everyone is vaping. Like, what is going on? And, should I do it because everyone else is? They're going, hang on a second. But if we look at the evidence, from a government source, it's 20% of kids who are vaping. It's not everyone. In fact, most people aren't. So let's not make them seem noisy. So trying to bust myths, change their normative perceptions, then the real anchor, the real thing that changes their behaviours is their ability to say no in periods of real pressure. So you've just started year 7, you're in a new school, you're looking around, picture it, you've just started a new school and you're 12, 13, you're going to look to other people and go, well, how do I behave here? How do I fit in? How do I develop social cachet to be part of this group? And that's when you're so vulnerable to people going, well, if you want to be part of our group, you wear this lip gloss, or we wear our shoes and our socks are like this. And we try to develop the skill in young people to go, well, I'm not going to do that. You do you. I'm going to choose this without the social fallout. So being able to say, no, I'm not a vapor. No, thanks. It's not for me, but you do you. So that they retain their social standing, they stand by their goals, and they don't do the things that they don't want to do. When we think about really serious things that peer pressure can lead to, things like drink driving, getting into a car without putting your seatbelt on, having way too many kids in the back of a car, we know that that can be absolutely catastrophic. Or unwanted sexual encounters, or being forced into something that you know, you're like, I don't want to be doing this, but it's just easier to keep going with the flow. That is what we want to prevent. So we use the same techniques as we do to vaping. So give them the information, that's great, and a lot of them will know it already. Get them to really critically think about who is selling this to you. You're just part of the algorithm, right? Get them to kind of push back and develop a bit of passion around, I don't want my pocket money going to the tobacco industry. I don't want to be funding organised crime. So get them empowered for change. And young people these days are particularly empowered by that, standing up to authority. But then give them the skills in the moment when they're about to get into a car and then know there's not enough seatbelts or seatbelts aren't going on to go, hang on, no, this isn't right. I'm going to stay here. Maddie, come with me. We're gonna go get an Uber. That's what we want to give them, because that's the moment that they pivot to danger or not danger.
And why do you, despite all of this, and kids kind of, I think they're very trusting in they're doing it, our friends are using it, we may as well try it. But then to continue that behavior, knowing what they know and knowing they don't really know the impacts of their health. Why is it vaping that has been one of those things that just feels like it's not normal? And you said the statistics aren't actually, kids think that everyone's doing it. Why do you think it's kind of just snuck into a bit of regular teenage behavior?
Exactly. It's such a good point. If we compare it to alcohol again, you drink a drink. If you drink it quickly, you get a head spin, you get drunk. There's a consequence straight away. With vaping, the consequences are almost invisible. It tastes great. You might get a little bit more energized and the vapor disappears. There's no consequence. So it almost feels like you're not doing anything at all. The consequences are invisible compared to, being in a car accident, or what the consequences is. You can see it, you can feel it, it's there. With vaping, it seems like nothing happens. We did a lot of focus groups with young people and they're like, not only is there no consequence, the stuff that happens is great. You kiss a girl at the club and they say, oh, you taste like strawberry. It's all positive. So that's the problem. It is very innocuous. It's sort of, you don't notice that you're getting hooked until until it's much too late. So I think young people, it's just too hidden. The consequences are way too hidden. And it's easy to slip into addictive patterns of behaviour, with vaping especially. They're formulated in such a way, if you're of an age where smoking was the thing that you did when you were 14 and you'd try one out the back of your backyard or down by the creek or whatever, you get this horrific throat burn and you'd be like, oh my God, that is horrible. And for a lot of people it didn't stick, and for some people it did. That throat burn is part of the combustion of a cigarette, but it's part the nicotine. And the early formulations of e-cigarettes had really harsh throat burn nicotine. I don't know who it was, but at one point they realized that you can actually add an acid to the mixture and it smooths it out. You don't get any throat burn. And they're like, this is great for novice users, because once you try it the first time, you don't get the throat burn. You don't get any negative consequence. And then you add on top of that, kiwi, lemon crush, watermelon, peach juice, and suddenly you've got no burning effect and it tastes great. The other thing we notice with young people is they really overestimate their ability to stop something. They're like, yeah, I can do that. I'll do it later. Or I can try one or two times and then I'll be able to stop. I don't think they realize how quickly they get hooked, and the fact that they actually don't have the skills to be able to stop when it comes to it.
Mm.
And part of this really scary, storm is the fact that adolescent brains, and I could talk about this for hours, so stop me. Adolescent brains aren't fully finished yet. They're still highly neuroplastic. They're still developing synapses and connections in their brain. That's why they're so great at learning piano and languages and everything when they're younger, is because it's easier for the brain to make new connections. The bad thing is when you add nicotine into the mix or any addictive drug, is that the brain goes, "Ooh, I really like that. I'm going to change my wiring so that I'm more responsive to that." So it increases your susceptibility to addictiveness later in life. But all of this is invisible to young people. They don't see any of that. So getting them to understand the inner workings, understand positive, dopamine, serotonin, reward, good, we call them, good rewards, bad rewards, short-term rewards, getting them to understand that is really important. And then reflecting on their behaviours and their ability to do that. Because I think, it'd be great. I wish I felt invincible like I did when, I was 13, 14. They just don't understand, and that's the scary thing.
So if knowing all this and knowing, as an adult with, full function, our brains are fully developed, we know the risks, we know that, all of the dangers, and the addiction and the behaviours and the costs, all those sorts of things. If I'm a teacher working with my students, what would you say is the top 3 things that we can do as teachers to educate our young people about not just the dangers? We know that scare tactics don't always work. They do with some kids, but a lot of kids know. What are some things that, maybe top 3 things that we could do in our classrooms to help with
Absolutely.
the issue?
Yeah. The first thing I do is to enter in with a really curious frame set. Get them to tell you what they know. So we often will use open-ended questions like, so tell me about this vaping thing. Tell me all you know about it. I really want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. Tell me, have you seen it before? Do you know what it's all about? Just to it's a good way of kind of handing the reins over to them. You're the experts here. I want you to tell me what you know about it. And then you can hear if there's anything within that you think might be a misperception, or they're overemphasizing the positives, or they're not saying any negatives at all. You've got this kind of groundwork of where they're at. Then the next thing is that you can gently correct anything where there's a misperception, or better yet, you can empower them to go, all right, let's check if what we've just said is right. Let's do some critical inquiry on some of these things. Is it right? Are we guessing right how many people actually use it? And then, get them to do, and you might do this in digital literacy, a mini investigation where they have to find, reliable sources of information to answer their questions. So turn that into critical inquiry. The other thing, the third thing I would do is to put them into situations and role play where they legitimately have to you get one person who is the convincer and one person who is just acting as themselves. And the convincer has to try to convince the other person to do something that they really don't want to do. It doesn't matter if it's vaping, it helps if it is. But what you're trying to do is get them to, with a good friend, and in a realistic way, not pretending to do karate kicks and I'm going to take you down and fake stuff that they're not really going to do, but to practice, what would you actually say if your best friend said, come on, I've got one, let's take it home. Get them to think it through. I'm adding a fourth one here, but going back to that, get them arced up about being had. These companies are out to get your pocket money. That is the only thing they care about. They don't care if you think you look cool. These guys are making billions of dollars a year on the fact that you are getting hooked on something that tastes like lollies. Get them angry and you'll see change, and get them really uncovering, where are these coming from? Who's providing them? Where is this money going? Hand the reins over to them and empower them to the point that they get I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to say no. It really light the fire within them to be passionate about health.
Mm.
At the forum that you hosted, Kel, the amazing former Olympian Libby Trickett was there talking, and she was so good. And one of the things that resonated with me was getting young people to realize that their bodies are their forever bodies. You will have this body your entire life. And that even resonated with me. I was like, oh my God, have I had my skin checked? When did I last go to the dentist? Oh my God. And then she said, and it was so beautiful, what adventures do you want your body to have? Thinking about the positive, kids are so excited about their lives, work with that excitement and work with the positive rather than focusing always on the negative. It'll hurt you. Think about all the things you will be able to do if you're not worrying about vaping and being addicted, So flipping it around and, what adventures do you want your body to have? I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, and we have used that little snippet quite a few times on socials, and I think it's just that just a really nice way to put everything that we teach our kids, like about making good decisions, looking after their bodies. Like it's not now. Like we're young people are pretty resilient. We're educating them for their future. Like we want them to be around into their 80s, 90s, 100s. Like that's a reality for them. They're probably going to be around well into their hundreds.
Exactly.
It's the positive decisions that we're making, or they're making now as young people, that will sustain them to have the most amazing adventures in their lifetime. If we do something to jeopardize that, then what's the point? Like, what's the point in being here?
Exactly. And the fact that you as teachers and as educators and, these influential figures in their lives, you're not saying it just to annoy them. You're saying it because you want the best version of them that they can be. I'm not doing this to get you in trouble. I don't care. It's not about suspensions or whatever. It's like, I want you to have a great life. And that's what we're trying to set up for you. And I think, I'm on your side, being a sort of mentor. I'm here to make your life the best life you can have, right? I think that's really important.
Yeah. That's just like gold. Like we want the best for our kids, and even as parents, we want the best for our children. They might not see it at the time, but we want them to be around for a very long time. Their life matters. And we've been saying that a lot, we've been saying PDHPE matters, but like health, our health and well-being is all we have. Like our bodies, we could have no money, but if we don't have our health, we've got nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, look, it's so interesting, and I observe a lot, and I'm like very against vaping, smoking, drugs. Like I feel like it's such a waste of your life that you're putting that into your body. And I think we have a real issue with adults as well, like adults walking around just like quickly. And again and again and again, I'm like, stop. Like, do you know what you're putting into your body?
That's it. Yeah. And it's really tough for kids whose parents might smoke or might vape, and they hear this message at school and they go home and they're like, well, my dad does, or my mum does, or my auntie does, or my older brother, or whatever. They're like, does that mean I'm a bad person? And in our primary school program that we're developing at the moment, we kind of talk about that head on, For older people, they might be addicted to it, and it doesn't make them bad. It's just bad for their bodies. So taking the judgment out of it and going, gosh, it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It's just a bad behavioral habit that we want to try and improve and maybe replace with something else. But you do see people just, and they're designed to be tactile. They're designed to fit perfectly in your palm. Some of them, because I've got a whole collection at work in my top drawer, some of them have got like interactive buttons, and the button is quite, really tactile, and it makes you want to touch it. It lights up when you inhale it. So it's really playing on that desire to get an instant hit, that dopamine hit, that rush, the same way as short form video on Instagram and TikTok. It's designed specifically to give you that release, and then you want a different one, so you go to another one. It's all that same behavior. So we really need to, and I'm genuinely worried about attention span of young people these days. It's all the same thing, instant gratification. So we're trying to stretch those behaviors out. The slow burn, focus on the things that you don't immediately get satisfaction from, but the high lasts longer. So that's things like running or reading or catching up with your friends or doing yoga. Or watching a movie and then talking about it afterwards, the high lasts longer. So getting them to try and experience those better positives, give them an alternative, is really important too. Because, when you think about it too much, you think, oh my God, we're done for.
Yeah, exactly. All doom and gloom. So
Yeah.
you mentioned before about the programs that you guys are developing with your team. So there's a primary version and a high school version. Is that correct?
That's right. The high school version is available for free. So I would really encourage, it's available now. I'd encourage teachers of stage 4 to check that out. So that is year 7 and 8 vaping prevention program. The primary school version is still in development. So we have yesterday we got the first copy of their handbook and it looks amazing. We've got a pilot tested in a few different schools. So we're getting schools to put their hand up to be part of the pilot. We can't yet roll it out. We're hoping that might be sort of a 2027, 2028 thing. So yes, but the high school one is good to go, ready to go. It's fully online, so you can be remotely onboarded, which is fantastic.
Good. And where can teachers access that?
Yep. So the best place to go is ourfuturesinstitute.org.au, and they will sort you out. Or if you just Google Our Futures Institute Vaping, there should be a button where you can sign up, and they'll contact you and get you sorted. There's a bunch of other programs that the same institute distribute that we have developed at the Matilda Centre, focusing on alcohol, cannabis, MDMA, other drugs that are designed for more of our year 10 and up students. Those ones are also available, but they do have a per head cost associated with them. They are amazing. Obviously, I can vouch for them being one of the researchers. But the vaping one is at no cost at the moment, which is which is fantastic.
And hopefully it stays like that. Like government needs to work out that we are all in partnership with each other. I think I've said that a lot. Like it's not just health. It's not just, you guys as researchers bring out these amazing programs. If you're going to put a cost to it, school's going to go, no, we don't have the money for that. But then you think all that time and all that energy and the millions of dollars that the government has invested, yes, it should be for free. Make it for free. This is important stuff. It's having an effect on the health and, well-being and choices of so many millions of young people, but also then the flip side, in hospitals and at doctors and, all that other stuff that happens.
Yeah. So we think about every child that we prevent or even delay vaping or smoking onset is one fewer person in hospital. And I think this whole argument about illicit tobacco, make the real cigarettes cheaper so that, smokers aren't going to the cheap ones, because we're losing all this money from lost tax. We're not thinking about the people who have, they might live till they're 80, but the last 20, 25 or 30 years of their lives are horrible. They're in and out of treatments. They are in and out of hospitals. It is a very low quality of life. And the cost of hospital care is so expensive. And we have an aging population as well. So every child that we can prevent means a healthier future for everyone. So yes, we hope that the government support for the subsidy for the vaping program continues. It's now in 1,000 schools, so we've got several 100,000 young people benefiting from it now. So we hope that continues. Yeah.
Nice. And we'll put all the show links with the programs and with websites and how teachers can get in contact with you guys. Well, not you, but part of the team, the Matilda team, with all those details so they can access all the vaping programs, but also any of the other things that you guys have that is so valuable. Like teachers aren't the experts. I always say that. It's that bridge, it's that gap. We're the educators, but we're not the experts. So I think it's just a perfect partnership to make use of. Emily, my last question for you today, and like I said, we could be here for hours.
Yeah.
So I'm so curious about all of this stuff. If you were to give your younger Em self some advice when she was living on the Central Coast, what would it be?
The answer, it would be stick to your guns, stick to what you believe in. Right? I didn't fit in in high school. I liked studying. I liked all the academic nerdy stuff, and there wasn't really a group that I fit in with. And so I ended up doing things like trying to be part of a group that I didn't really fit into because it felt like the thing that I should do. And I look back and I'm like, I should have just said I don't want to do that, because not that it necessarily had terrible consequences, but I look back, I'm like, God, Emily, just say what you think.
Yeah.
So I think that would be, so stand strong, stick to your guns, stick to what you believe in, because you'll find that you have more genuine friends that way. There's a bunch of people I can remember I think it was year 8, and there was one girl that the group just decided they didn't like, and they were all, whispering around saying, we're all going to sit over there, don't tell Alana. And I liked Alana. She was quite quiet and also, a bit nerdy and academic like me. But of course, what did I do in that moment? I also got up and I sat in a circle without Alana and looked back and I'm like, that was a horrible thing to do.
Right.
And from that point onwards, she wasn't in our group anymore. And I think back, I'm like, I actually would have been really good friends with her and regret that sort of thing. So be bold and stick to your guns is what I would say.
Yeah, nice, beautiful advice. And look, I've got lots of stories about that too. And going to an all-girls school was great, but also the bitchiness that happens. It's like a whole nother
story. It is nasty. Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining us today. Look, we had you at the K to 10 forum, and I knew your energy would have been perfect for the podcast. So we value your time from last month, but also today. I know that you're a busy researcher, and we really appreciate your expertise and your passion and your energy. And thanks for the work that you're doing to support the health of young people across Australia. We're very lucky to have you.
Look, this kind of stuff is what makes my work exciting, and the contact with teachers, because I don't get that as part of my day-to-day work. So thank you for having me, Kel. It's been amazing, and I hope this is helpful and informative and interesting to everyone out there who's listening. Thanks.
Thank you. This episode was brought to you by the K to 6 primary and 7 to 10 PDHPE memberships, the CAFS Collective, and the Health and Movement Science membership, our communities designed to support and empower busy teachers like you. Explore them along with a suite of helpful teaching tools at thelearnnet.com. If you've loved today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share with a colleague, take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram at kellybell.coach. I love seeing what resonates with you. Make sure you subscribe to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay connected. And if you took even one thing away from today's chat, I'd be so grateful if you could please leave us a review. See you next week. Here's to finally reclaiming your time as a busy New South Wales teacher.